But yeah, so I did want to say briefly that today there was no justice for Breonna Taylor and her family. The criminal justice system has failed us once again, and it's a slap in the faces of the black community. Sometimes I get up here, guys, to be a black person in this world, um, to be enraged all of the time. And there are moments where I'm just like, I get really defeated because, the world is pretty much like on fire. And sometimes you feel like what you're doing doesn't matter, but it does. But we get into our cynical moments, right? Although that's not my baseline, I wouldn't be in this field if I didn't believe in the human potential. But there are times where like the stuff that's happening outside just really gets to you. And so you just have to kind of like take that in. And this kind of leads into what I'm talking today, because I believe that creativity is what's going to help shift the social fabric of our society, because we do have to get creative when we try one thing and it doesn't work out, right? I mean, if you just take a look at 2020, we really had to get creative with how we did things. And so that's the topic for today is creativity. It's mind-blowing to me that the number of people that I come across that don't think they're creative. Especially when I work with my clients, they're like, oh, I don't have these skill sets, or I'm not creative enough to do this thing and so forth. And it breaks my heart because creativity is in all of us. It's just comes in different forms, so what you may think is creative probably is. When people think of creativity, they think of like, art, music, painting, sculpting, and even writing. But creativity isn't just that, right? And if you find yourself in one that you don't fall into any of those buckets, you're probably wondering like, now what, right? Are you disqualified from creativity because you don't fit in that box? Well, here's the thing. Creative people, they solve problems. Creative people, they address problems. And they find ways to make things better. They find ways to make our lives better. Creativity often inspires. And if you've done some of these things in your lives, right, with other people, or you came up with solutions that really helped or impacted people, then you, my friend, are creative. Hey, Samaya. I mean, if you think about it, if you're able to come up with solutions to solve some of our biggest social issues, you have to be creative. To hustle and to be an entrepreneur, you have to be creative. To even just to go up against like, barriers and systems, anything that's holding you back from doing what you're here to do, you have to get creative. But I don't blame you for thinking that way, right? For thinking that maybe you're not as creative, especially when maybe somewhere way back when someone really shut that creativity down, right? And frankly, a lot of our school systems don't cultivate our creative selves, right? And so I remember when I was like in the third, fourth grade, my grandmother threw away all my drawings of The Simpsons that it took hours to draw. And I was devastated, I cried. But there's always a time that we can look back into our lives. And then we look at it now and we're like, we knew that was that pivotal moment in our lives where we pretty much like locked our creativity in a box somewhere and just kind of left it sitting on a shelf and we just never came back to it. So I really want to talk about how not shutting that part of you, how that really impacts you in present day. And a quote that I always go back to is by Brene Brown. And she says, unused creativity is not benign. It metastasizes, right? It turns into grief, rage, judgment, sorrow, shame. She says that, we are creative beings. We are by nature creative. It just gets lost along the way. It gets shamed out of us. And it's just a powerful quote. And so I think about my life. Like I've always been a writer. When I was 6 or 7, my cousin and I, we used to like write short stories and take turns illustrating it. And those were some of the best moments of my life. And then as I got older, I got into poetry scene, was doing the open mic scene, and writing became a form of healing for me for a very, very long time. But in like 2007, when I graduated from grad school, I just like stopped writing. I stopped reading, and it wasn't just like a tiny moment in my life. It was extended. I stopped being creative for about 8 years. And, I'm really not sure why. Maybe I got tired of writing painful teenage poetry. Maybe I got tired, in grad school, you got to do a lot of reading and writing and all that stuff. And maybe grad school literally drained the creativity out of me. And there was a series of events that followed as a result of all this unused creativity. And as a result of me shutting that part of me down, I realized, unused creativity was harming my health. It kind of, just built up all this resentment, and I didn't have a way of channeling my emotions. So all that grief and all that rage, just corroded my insides, kind of like acid, I would say. It led me to really lose a sense of direction, a sense of passion, a sense of meaning and purpose, and I felt numb, right? I just disconnected from that. I'm not sure if some of you can relate to that, but it also led me to quitting my job. It led me to living overseas. It led me to finding the healing that I needed so that I could, be here doing this live with y'all. And so I don't know if you can relate to this. Can you relate to having all these ideas and all these things that you want to do, but it feels like it's locked up somewhere, or maybe it's lost? And so I want to read that quote again because it's just so powerful. Every time I read it, I lose my mind. Unused creativity is not benign because it metastasizes. I have to say that word slowly. It turns into grief, rage, judgment, sorrow, and shame. We are creative beings. We are by nature creative. It gets lost along the way. It gets shamed out of us. So let me ask you, all right, what part of your creativity have you shelved for fear of not being good enough? Maybe you're wrapped into someone else's standards, right? What is it that you want to create but haven't, and why? What is stopping you from expressing, experimenting, engaging, and taking a chance in your creativity? And also, what's your story? We all have a story to tell. What story haven't you shared? So as we get older, we have this deep longing to do something. Some of us figure it out while the rest of us is still yearning. We're still unsure, we're unclear, but still working through things. I've been in conversations with people lately who, they've been getting in their own way, trying to step into their crafts, trying to step into their fullest potential. But they're having a hard time figuring out how to create that thing. And I'm here to say that if you don't create that thing, it's going to turn against you. It's sort of like in the therapist world, we say that the idea that depression is anger turned inwards. And so when you don't release that creativity, when you don't experiment with it, when you don't use your curiosity to engage in it, what happens to your body? What happens to your emotions? And I want you to return to the questions earlier that I asked earlier, and just remember that you are a creative being. Remember that your thoughts and your emotions, though, they need a place to go. So stored up energy and stored up emotions, they can't remain inside of you. So let me ask you some more questions. Like, do you believe that you're here to do more than what you're currently doing? But you're not sure how to get started. In fact, maybe you've been stuck for a while, confused about the direction of your life. Perhaps there's like unresolved stuff, if you're still holding on to stuff that's you've been trying to let go of for a long time, that also gets in the way. And this is why, I got the idea of wanting to create something to help people like move past this. And it's something that I'm working on. I kind of shared it on Instagram, but it's called Unblock and Thrive. Some of the details are coming later, but it's really for folks who feel really, really stuck, but maybe they can't make the commitment to work intensely and deeply for 3 months at a time. Maybe you can't make the commitment to work in a group setting for an 8-week coaching program, but for a short amount of time, we can really go deep discover what those gifts and talents are. What are those things that you're not using, why you're not using it, and then how do you create a plan to now get started, like immediately. So that's something I'm working on. The link is in the bio. But I really want to know, like, what is it that you're not creating that needs to get out? It needs to come out of you. So I want you to think about that moving forward. And I'd love to hear more about that in the comments below. Just share that with me. And I see some people that they could relate. Yeah. We gotta get that creativity out of us. But thank you for joining my live. This is live number 11. You can find me on defineresistance.com, where I share more stuff like this. And I also am in the process of writing my book. It's in the edit stage, a rewriting stage, and in a lot of stages. But anyway, thanks for joining me. I will see you guys next week for my last and final live. I don't know if it's going to be final, but it is live number 12.